If I'd ask you what's happening in this picture, you probably would guess someone is sick in bed, or maybe they're relaxing. But in fact, what we're looking at here is an example of the idea in the Gemara Pesachim Daf Kuf Ches Med Aleph, the idea of a seba. A seba is reclining. Specifically reclining while drinking or while eating. The Gemara begins 16 lines from the top of the page, and Daf Kuf, where we quote a Mishnah, as the Mishnah states that afilu ani Yisrael lo yochel ad sheyesev, even a poor person should not eat on the Seder night ad sheyesev until he leans. The question we have to clarify is, when it comes to eating, you need to lean, lo yochel. What exactly do you need to lean for eating? Do you need to lean for eating the meal? Do you need to lean for eating the matzah, the maror? Do you have to lean for the wine? The Mishnah is analyzed by the Gemara on Kuf Ches Med Aleph. Itmar. It was stated, matzah tzarech haseba, maror ein tzarech haseba. It was stated that for matzah, the mitzvah of matzah, you need to lean, but for maror, you do not need to lean. The Rashbam explains, matzah tzarech haseba, that by matzah you need to lean. Why? She'ochel matzah shel mitzvah laila harishon kibnei chorin shu zecher legula. So he explains, first of all, we're not talking about leaning in general every time you eat matzah. We're talking about eating the matzah shel mitzvah on the first night of Pesach. She'ochel matzah shel mitzvah laila harishon kibnei chorin. When we eat the matzah of mitzvah on the night of Pesach, that first night, like free people, we try to experience the freedom, we try to show our freedom, so we lean like free men, we recline, while eating the matzah, shehu zecher legula, which commemorates being redeemed. So in other words, while we're eating this food which shows freedom, which shows that we are redeemed, that we are nigal, at the same time we should express that with reclining, to show, in fact, we feel free. However, maror ein tzarech haseba, explains the Rashbam, maror you do not need to lean, shehu zecher le'avdus, since it is commemorating, it's remembering the slavery. As we saw the pasuk when we introduced the psukim of the entire story of leaving Mitzrayim, that by maror vayimaru es chayim ba'avodah kasha, that maror, as the word implies, maror implying bitter, maror is supposed to remember the avdus, becoming an eved, a slave, and therefore it doesn't make sense at that time we should be leaning, reclining, since that shows slavery. It would be inconsistent to be leaning or reclining while eating a symbol of slavery, because reclining is a symbol of freedom, and maror, bitterness, is a symbol of slavery. But the Gemara gives a third mitzvah, yayin. Yayin, by wine, Itmar mishmei Rav Nachman, it was stated in the name of Rav Nachman, tzarech haseba. It was stated in the name of Nachman that when you drink wine, you need to recline. V'itmar mishmei Rav Nachman ein tzarech haseba. And it was stated in the name of Rav Nachman, the opposite, that you do not need to recline. So we have two mitzvahs that are clear whether you have to recline or not. And this third one, by wine, it sounds like it's a contradiction. By wine, either you do have to recline, or some say in the name of Nachman that you do not need to recline. The Gemara senses this inconsistency, and the Gemara wants to know, so which is it? Do you need to recline? Do you need to lay down while drinking wine or not? V'lo pligi, says the Gemara, and we are not arguing. There is no argument in the statements of Rav Nachman. Ha bitarti kasei kamai, this is by the first two cups. Ha, this, bitarti kasei basrai, is by the last two cups. Meaning, there are two cups that you need to lean for, and two cups you do not need to lean for. But again, the Gemara is not so clear as to which of those two cups Rav Nachman holds you need to lean for, and which ones you do not. So the Gemara is about to give logical reasonings why the first two cups should be the one to lean, and not the last two, and then the Gemara will give svaras why the last two cups should be the one that you lean for, and not the first two. Let's see it inside. Amru lalahai gisa. Some say it to this side. V'amru lalahai gisa. And some say it to this side. Amru lalahai gisa. Trekasi kamai ba'oseba. Some say it to this side, that the first 2 cups you need to lean. What's the logic? Because now is when you are beginning the freedom. Now is when you're talking about the freedom in Haggadah, the time where we talk about that we were slaves and we were taken out. There's first 2 cups, starting with Kiddush and ending with the bracha of the Kos and Geula, after tell the story of how we were slaves. That's the time to say, to describe, since we're describing the freedom, we're beginning the freedom, that's when we should be leaning. To show, in fact, we are free, that's when we should recline. Trekase basrai lo ba'oseba. But the last 2 cups, you should not need to lean. Why? My dehava hava. Whatever was. Meaning, what happened already happened. I already was free. My dehava hava. We were already freed. Why should we recline anymore? I showed that I was already free. I expressed my freedom by reclining, a symbol of free people. That's enough. I don't need to do it anymore for the last 2 cups. That's the logic why the first 2 cups should be obligated and not the last 2. Amr l'lahai gisa. And some say it to the other side. Adrabba. Just the opposite. Trekasi basrai ba'oseba. The last 2 cups you need to lean. Why? The logic. Because at that moment, at that time, we became free. The Rashbam explains, during that time, he is redeemed, and in redemption he's saying the Haggadah. Meaning it makes sense to actually wait till you're really free to say the words to recline. And during the beginning of the story, as much as it's very nice to recline during that time, the Gemara says, Trekase kamai lo ba'oseba. Dekati avadim hayinu ka'amar. The first 2 cups, you do not need to recline, you do not need to lean, since still we were slaves. As we are still saying, avadim hayinu, we're still saying that we were slaves in Egypt. Meaning that it doesn't make sense to say that we should be reclining the first 2 cups, and at the same time to show freedom, where we're saying the words, we are still slaves. Because we're trying to show we're slaves at the first part of the Seder. It doesn't make sense then to be reclining during the first 2 cups. If anything, it makes sense to recline only for the last 2 cups. So we have logical arguments both ways. Now the question is, what's the conclusion of Reb Nachman? The Gemara says, Hashadit marhachi. Now that we have stated this way, v'it marhachi, and stated that way, we gave logical reasons why both the first and the last 2 cups should be the ones that Reb Nachman was saying you have to lean, you have to recline for. Idi v'idu ba'oseba, that both the first 2 cups and the last 2 cups you are required to lean. That is the conclusion of the Gemara, that idi v'idi ba'oseba, both the first 2 cups and the last 2 cups you are required to lean.